Hey Vineyard, so welcome to this new YouTube video, Conversations in Lockdown. I hope to, in the coming weeks, interview some people in our church community who have been going through things in the last, let's say, year, and ask them a little bit more about how they saw God in working at work in that. And the first conversation I'll have is with Joanna Ashok, who actually hasn't been to our church for a while. She left for Switzerland 2.5 years ago, but has been a very active student in our student ministry and in our church. Quite visible in the church, often on platform. She also preached a couple of times. And I'm going to do an interview with her because she has quite a story to tell about the last year and a half. And God has certainly been at work in that. So, hi, Joanna.
Hi, good to
Hey,
see you again.
good to see you again. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about where you are now, because you studied in Groningen for what was it, 3 or 4 years?
Yes,
What did you
great.
study? What did you do? What are you doing now?
So I am a chemical engineer, and I finished my bachelor's in the Netherlands, and I am currently in Switzerland, in Lausanne at EPFL. I just graduated from EPFL, finishing a master's in chemical engineering and biotech, and now I'm looking for a job. So just taking a little bit of a break and taking it easy, because the last 2 years have been difficult, and so it's been nice to take a little bit of a break before I get stuck into work all over again.
Yeah. And so, just in short, how do you look back now on your time in Groningen and in Vineyard?
Some of the best years of my life, without a doubt.
Mm,
It was just so wonderful, filled with opportunity and amazing people. When I came to Vineyard for the first time, I remember it very clearly. It was I think, my second time at Bible study. And towards the end of the Bible study, I remember crying because I realized that in Vineyard, I found the answer to my 10-year-long prayer request that God would give me Christian friends. And
mm,
this was the first place where I had met Christians who were my age and loved Jesus. And it was amazing.
wow.
So it was like 3 years of just really growing in my own faith, making my faith my own, and
Mm,
getting stuck in there, getting plugged in, being really part of a community for the first time in my life. So that was really awesome.
yeah.
Loved it.
Yeah, and I mean, you are very. What I really loved about you and your time that we were both at Vineyard um, was how you connected with pretty much everyone in church, and especially within the student ministry. You were always welcoming new students, getting them connected to the right people, to housing, and to just to the activities, to groups. Like you were very socially active. I remember.
Yeah, it was really a lot of fun. So I was part of the student ministry, which was absolutely the highlight of my life. And I use it in all of my job interviews, actually. I always tell them
Nice.
about the time. Yeah, because it was such an opportunity to grow as well and be really able to serve the people that I love so much.
Mm,
Because one of the most beautiful things about Vineyard is that no 2 years have ever looked the same.
yeah.
Every single one of the 3 years of my time there have been completely different in
Mm,
outrageously different ways.
right.
And so being really part of the community, being able to start a mentorship program, being able to organize the events, the spring soirees, they were all just so much fun and such a learning experience because it taught me not just about people, but about how to love people the way God loves. Because
Mm,
God says, they will know you by your love. And so I think this was a learning ground where I realized, oh, that was no joke. That is what it's supposed to be.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I love that what you said about growing also as a person. This is really what we still see. Like so, 2.5 years later, I see new students coming in September and kind of getting connected and a little bit shy and kind of hey, how are you doing and this, and then a year later. They would be like, "Hey, welcome. We're this. They're connected. Get you to a group." Like, there's this well getting more comfortable in the community, but like taking that ownership of like, okay, like really soon I'm no longer a guest, I'm now a host. I'm helping other people to get connected. I feel part of it. I have ownership of this. We still see that, happening. It's something I really enjoy.
Oh, that's amazing. I'm so happy. I feel like a proud mom.
Yeah, well, how about a proud older sister?
Oh, yeah, probably.
Maybe that works. Good. So really the side what we got to see of you in your time with us, what stood out to me was, this happy, encouraging person, very very visible, and just yeah, this very outgoing person. But the last year and a half, like when you came to visit this summer, and then we had coffee, and you were telling me all these things that happened in the last year and a half, which really was, well, let's say a darker side of you, or like a shadow side of you that has come out in the last year and a half of your story, and just things going on behind the scenes. Um, which is really a different, yeah, it shocked me a little bit at first, but there was also so much beauty in what you said. So maybe you want to share a little bit about, what your life has been like in the last year and a half. Of course, with a lot of lockdown as well, due to COVID. Yeah, maybe what do you want to share about that?
So I guess the story is the most appropriate thing to share, and really just the testimony of what's been going on. Because when I was in Vineyard, I was very much sort of a little bit kind of took as much of the opportunities as I could have, very much sort of on stage, very cheerful, and
Mm.
everybody knew me as that. Oh, the
Yeah,
girl that's smiling or whatever.
right.
And
Yeah.
so that was a very like it was a great person. It was a great sort of like image to have, and I was like, oh, that's who I am. I'm
Mm.
really happy. And so that's kind of what I had defined myself as. I'm happy. I'm like, I've got a lot of friends. I'm an extrovert. All of these and my position in that community was
Mm.
so important for me.
Mm.
And then I made a decision that I believe was very much led by God to leave Groningen and to move to Switzerland.
Mhm.
And that was kind of when everything started to fall apart a little bit. Because when people think Switzerland, they're like, wow, mountains and hiking and snow, and it's beautiful, and you
Mhm.
must be having
Yeah.
like the most amazing time. And fair enough, it's amazing here, and I really loved it. But moving to Switzerland was a really, really difficult process. So
Mm.
I moved to Switzerland August 2019. This is just a few months before March 2020, where the world's pandemic hit.
Yeah.
And it was extremely difficult because here I was struggling to make friends at university
Mm.
because everybody spoke French and I didn't speak French. So I could not befriend them really. They just were in their little cliques. I went to church, but church was really hard to enter as well. Tried starting prayer meetings, things didn't work. Church had its own cliques, and it was just a very, very difficult time.
Mm.
And my degree was absolutely no joke, very difficult as well for me. And this was sort of the beginning of something that I didn't want to admit, because I was suddenly extremely isolated, and I didn't know what to do. I was so used to being with the community, and
Mm.
now it was all gone.
Right.
And this was
This
okay.
was this was before COVID.
This was before COVID. So
Right.
already my mental health was kind of declining as well. And so anybody who kind of knew me in February of 2020, people met me and they were like, something is very different. Are you
Mm.
okay? I'm like, I'm fine. I'm great. Everything's okay. um, and then the pandemic hit. And then I think one of the most dangerous things for me was then to be in that state and then be alone with myself for
Mm.
months on end. And I had no friends here. So I wasn't going to make plans to kind of see someone, to take a
Yeah.
walk or something like that. And this was when things started to get a lot worse, because it wasn't, yeah, it just began, I just began spiraling. And so I just got lower and lower, where I just was struggling so much, because I was like, God, if you could do this for me in Groningen, why won't you give me a community here? Why
Mm.
won't you give me friends? And that was really difficult for me, because I was like, God just doesn't like me. That was kind of the conclusion I was coming to. And it progressively got more difficult, because around this time was the time that I finally decided it was probably wise to start dealing with a very traumatic experience that I had when I was a child. I was 8 years old, and I had kind of shut it out from my memory for most of my life. But actually, just before my last year started in Groningen, someone had asked me some question. It was something like, "Oh, have you had a traumatic experience?" And I remember in that moment, everything came back. It was like this weight of this memory just came on me, and I didn't know what to do. And so I kind of like put it away, and I was like, "Oh, God deals with it, and it's okay. I don't have to deal with it now." And then now you're alone in lockdown, and you're, like you're feeling super low, and you have to deal with this as well. And I started having flashbacks, which I had never had before, and they were extremely scary. So for anyone who doesn't know what a flashback is, it's when in one moment, for me, it was like I was back there in that moment, and this
reliving
world,
it.
yeah, and this world doesn't exist anymore, and I'm reliving exactly what like terrified me and traumatized me as a child.
Wow.
And this would happen sort of on and off, and I could never tell. It was like, "Oh, you touched me suddenly," and I'm like, so, and I would just go mute, and I couldn't say anything, and it was genuinely horrifying.
Yeah.
And things got progressively worse. And it was only in December 2020, January 21, where I was going to admit to myself that I was depressed, because I was depressed.
Wow.
And it was, I couldn't remember the last time I felt happy. I couldn't remember the last time I felt anything at all. And it was just so difficult, and I could not tell. I felt like I couldn't tell anyone as well, because people sort of had this idea of me of, being someone who can handle herself. She's moved halfway across the world for her studies and so on.
Yeah.
And so it was
were there people that you could have talked to about this?
I mean, also I could have talked to my parents. I could have talked to my close friends, and I did speak to sort of one or two people, but I was too scared to even call it depression, because I was like, people like me, you don't have depression, you know?
Yeah. So you call it like, I'm not doing so well, I feel a bit alone, like you kind of masquerade it.
Yeah, I'm just having a low
level.
Yeah. And to be fair, I should have seen the warning signs, because at this point, when I had admitted that I had depression, I had attempted suicide twice already. So, and I thought it was just a momentary sort of lapse in judgment. But unfortunately, there was also, it was really weird. So the first time was in November 2019, when I think November, around that time, when I had moved here. And then again, it was in June of 2020. So that was very, very messy. But nothing happened. I didn't hurt myself or anything like that. The Lord used my stupidity in that moment to my advantage, which I'm so grateful for.
But still, like, more than suicidal thoughts. There was an action involved.
Yeah, I was there, and like the first time I was at the edge of my balcony, and then the second time, I'm sorry if this is too graphic for some people, but the second time I ended up looking for knives and drawers, and the knives were right in front of me, like the sharp knives were in front of me, but I could only find the butter knives, and so that was, I think, the Lord as well on that.
It's protection.
So that was really difficult. But I think the moment I admitted that, okay, I was depressed, and this was more than just like I'm feeling a little sad today, but this sort of went on for like a month with no respite. You sort of crying yourself to sleep, and there's just deep emptiness inside. And I was begging God every night without fail, just that he would kill me and take me home. Like, please don't let me live anymore. I just don't want to. There was no purpose. There's no use. And it was just like, I think if anybody would have heard me, they would have been very concerned. But it got progressively worse from January 2021, and it was just a very speedy downhill from there. Because they say admitting it is the first step of, recognizing you have a problem and all that. But admitting it to me also meant that I felt like God owed me healing in that moment, because I was praying and I was like, why won't you heal me? Why won't you fix this? Like, you've done so many things. You've cured my mother of a genetic disease that would have never been cured otherwise, like, why won't you heal me of depression? And so I was really faltering in my faith, because I could barely go to church, because church had started a series on Ecclesiastes. When you're depressed, going to church every Sunday and listening to how life is meaningless does not help.
That's not the mental health book, let's say.
No.
it's
And
full
so
of
I
wisdom, but yeah.
No, but
Sorry.
I had reached this point where I had actually come to this very roundabout conclusion of, oh, if I commit suicide, I'm going to go to hell because I'm a Christian. So
Mm.
if maybe I just don't believe in God for a little while and then commit suicide, then if I close my eyes, it doesn't exist, sort of thing. And so because I'd reached that point where I was like, you know what? I think God hates me. I thought God hated me. I thought my Christian friends were judging me for all the decisions that I was making, because I was trying everything. I just wanted to feel something, do
Yeah,
something,
yeah.
you know,
So
like,
when you're in isolation, when you're
yeah.
in depression, your mind, your thoughts really take you to very weird places,
Mhm.
especially when you don't get to express it, talk about it with others. They can give you some feedback.
Yeah.
It's yeah,
So
yeah,
I was seeing a counselor from the summer of June 2020, because at that point I kind of recognized I did have I
yeah,
recognized, I was like, oh, maybe I'm
yeah,
feeling down. Like, a counselor would be a good idea.
yeah.
And there was a really wonderful Dutch lady from church
Yeah.
who was a counselor that I was talking with. And yeah, and so January comes around and then it gets worse. And I think around March and March, April, I was really struggling. And I was so grateful for my housemate because she was always there. So, nothing could necessarily happen at home. She left for 3 weeks at the
Mm.
end of end of April, beginning of May. And I remember really clearly, because at the one night, I remember I hosted a game party or something like that. And after everyone left, the depression came back so strongly.
Wow.
And I decided that night was the night I was going to kill myself. And
Wow.
I was going to do it for sure. And so I was in the middle of cleaning up the house so my housemate wouldn't come back to like a dirty house, getting my things in order, passwords, everything, so people could access my stuff. And I was sending I was sending these hey, I just wanted to let you know that I love you kind of messages to my friends. And just so that, in the morning when they woke up, they wouldn't feel bad or
Yeah.
something when they
So
found out.
really, this conscious preparation for
Yeah. Yeah. It wasn't anymore like, oh, tonight, oh, accidentally, I just feel too bad. No, it was like, hey,
yeah,
I think
it's
it's
not
time.
even spur of the moment.
Yeah, it was a little bit, it was kind of everything had built up and I couldn't handle it anymore.
Wow.
And I remember that one of my friends picked up the phone and called me and was like, what's going on? Why are you sending me these messages? This sounds a little bit off. And I was like, I remember thinking to myself, I need to give the most Oscar worthy performance of my life, trying to
Mm.
convince my friend that I am perfectly fine.
Yeah.
And so, but you can't in that moment, because I
No.
think subconsciously all I wanted was someone to say, hey, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere.
Mhm.
And my friend managed to keep me online. And they knew that as long as I was on the phone call, I was going to be okay, because I wasn't going to go anywhere and do anything. And this is where it got quite weird, because um, I was on the phone call with my friend, and I remember I was then lying in bed because I was so exhausted, and I saw sort of like these three men walk into my room in my mind's eye. And they weren't really men. They had their flesh falling off of their bones, and they had swords in their hand. And I remember I'm telling my friend, hey, these people are here to take me to my grave. I need to go with them.
Wow.
Understandably, they were quite shocked, but they remained calm, and they were like, okay, I know you think prayer is not going to do anything, because at that point I probably had a small city praying for me. My parents had told everybody and stuff. No, I hadn't told my parents at this point.
Yeah.
And so I was like, yeah, person's not going to do anything. But at the moment my friend prayed, these men got so angry and they took their swords and they plunged it into me. Like, I felt the pain of that. And it was just the most surreal, horrible experience ever. You want to die, you're now experiencing this pain, you don't know what's going on.
Mm.
And then afterwards, when I spoke with and so then they
Yeah.
left, they got angry, they left. I was so tired, I fell asleep talking to my friend.
Yeah.
And the next morning I woke up alive, and
Yeah.
I was like, wow.
So
And this was
yeah, what was this? Is this
like,
like the spiritual reality of the darkness of the depression and the suicidal thoughts that kind of was revealed to you?
I think so, but I also think it like this was a much bigger spiritual battle that I had not really taken seriously until now,
Mm.
because it had the same hallmarks of this last two times that I tried to attempt suicide. Because the first time I was coming back from class and I had to leave class early because all I could hear in my mind was just like, you're never going to make it. Or it's just these voices that were saying things.
Yeah.
As soon as I got home, I had a balcony at the place that I was staying, and it was in my bedroom. And as soon as I got home, I just kept hearing, I was like, yeah, like the balcony, it's only there for you to jump out of. And so, and you're just hearing this. And
Amazing.
I genuinely didn't know what was going on. So I was like, I'm tired. I need a nap. Took
Mm.
a nap, woke up because I had a horrible, like, demonic dream, where the devil was or like some kind of demonic thing was trying to get me. I wake up, and the first thing is, you can end it if you jump out the building,
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that was the first time. The second time, again, I had the most amazing moment with God. And right afterwards, I had this moment where I heard these voices very clearly. The
Mm.
knives are over there. You know where they are. You should take it and end this because you're just imagining things. God actually hates you. And so I was just hearing these things, and it was driving me crazy. And so I was going to like act on it. And so those were the three things. And I think that there is more than just the depression. I think that there was a spiritual battle also happening at the same
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so then this happened, and sort of it's that turning point, this last attempt, because that kind of shook me up.
Yeah.
I talked to my counselor, being the wise woman that she is, she made me make an appointment with a doctor immediately. And so I made an appointment with the doctor, and I got a medication.
Yeah.
And so I was on medication for depression, actually, for a few months. And so this medication is interesting because what it does is it dulls everything. So your lows aren't very low, but any high that you have is also gone.
Yeah.
And that was okay. So the depression became a bit manageable. I finished my degree. I finished my thesis while going through all of this.
Wow.
And I successfully started having worse flashbacks. So this was where things started to get even more messy, where my doctor recommended I see a psychiatrist. And because my doctor suspected that I had bipolar disorder.
Right.
And so I saw a psychiatrist. I told him what was going on. The moment I started telling him about my last attempt and the men and stuff like that, he thought I was having psychotic episodes and wanted me to go on antipsychosis drugs.
Right.
And so I declined to make any decision on that. And I had completely given up hope at this point. I was like, well, this is what I'm going to live with. I had finally built up the courage to tell my parents. So my parents were praying and things like that. And then I came to the Netherlands to visit. that was 2021 summer. This was in August. So this has been going on for a long time. In August, I come to visit, and my first day, I land and I see two friends of mine. So Samson and Sylvia, some of you may know them. And I remember like just crying, and and I was just like, yeah, the suicidal, like the meds are helping. And I told them about everything. They had no idea what was going on either. And they were like, okay, can we pray for you? And I was like, sure, but it's not going to do anything. Like, go for it,
That's all.
And
Yeah.
yeah. And I was suicidal. So I was like, please pray right now, because I am genuinely afraid that between leaving your house and the next person I'm going to stay with, I will do something. So, because the meds only help so much. They prayed. And I kid you not, the moment that they prayed, it was like a 5-10 minute prayer. It was like a weight was off my shoulders. It was the first moment in 2 years that I felt overwhelming relief from what I had been going through. And it was like there was this freedom that I hadn't experienced. And I was crying because I was like, is this what freedom feels like? And that was incredible to me. I was like, maybe Jesus loves me. And so, yeah. And so that was really, really like powerful for me, because it was a 5-minute prayer. They laid their hands on me and gone, that depression. And it didn't come back, and it hasn't come back since, which was amazing. And, but I went on for the rest of my trip, and the depression was gone. But what I was still struggling with was was the flashbacks. And so this was very
Mhm.
difficult as
Yeah.
well, because you're
Yeah.
meeting friends and nobody knows.
Yeah.
And I think if you were with me for a little while longer, you'd notice that something is very erratically off with me. Um, but yeah, and so I finished my holiday and I was still dealing with this. And then I came here. I came back to Switzerland. And the Lord's provision is absolutely incredible,
Mm.
because through the friend of a friend of a friend that I met in a completely different city on a one-off event,
Yeah.
and kind of invited myself to their Bible study or whatever, I ended up being introduced to a group of people who meet in a house here, like a home church.
Right.
And I told them my story, and I told them how God healed me from depression and how that was amazing and incredible. I was still on depression medication,
Mhm.
just to be safe. And throughout all of this, I was still carrying a lot of pain from what happened to me as a
Yeah.
child,
Yeah.
because yeah, that sort of thing just stays with you, and I didn't know how to
Yeah.
get rid of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's still unresolved
Yeah.
trauma. Like it's
Yeah, exactly.
not worked through. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And oh, and I forgot to mention the most interesting thing actually was when the moment that I was healed from the depression, I had 2 hours later, I called my sister. It was like 4 a.m. where they were. But actually, exactly at that time, my sister told me my dad woke up and came out and was like talking with my sister, because he was like, something's really angry with our family. It feels like something in the spiritual realm is really angry.
Whoa.
And that was crazy to me. I was like, but I was just delivered of my depression. So, there
Yeah.
was this real
Yeah.
spiritual aspect that was going on.
Wow.
And yeah. And so
Is it
then,
also confirmed in that dream or kind of that waking vision that you had of the angry man that came in and
yeah,
like yeah, other points in your story where there's this awareness of a spiritual realm that's involved in all of this, that plays a
mhm,
role in it.
yep, mhm, absolutely. And yeah. And so that was really like crazy to me, because I had, like, now I was like, okay, this is actually way more than what I'm seeing it to be. And
Mm.
so that kind of gave me also like a lot more faith, and it grew my faith. It encouraged me that God was still there and somehow working behind the scenes.
Wow.
And so I met these people, and then they heard my story, and they were like, it seems like something's still a bit there. Why don't we take an afternoon to pray for you? It
Mm.
didn't need an afternoon at the end, but they ended up coming together, a couple of girls, because that's who I was
Yeah.
comfortable with, because of like the things that happened to me. And so they were like, okay, we're going to pray. And I remember in that moment telling them, I'm so scared. I'm so scared, because I really don't want to live through another flashback. I
Yeah.
emotionally cannot handle it, especially if it's going to be vivid. And I'm so scared that because it's so
Yeah.
spiritual,
Yeah.
it's going to happen again.
Yeah.
And as it would happen, they started praying for me. I closed my eyes, and immediately it was a flashback, and I was that little girl again. And it was, but the people that were there, like, it was a lot more evil almost than I remembered. But I remember in that one moment, as they're praying for me, this like little girl, suddenly I'm not in the flashback anymore. And it's like that little girl looks at me and says, okay, goodbye. And everything just goes to black.
Mm.
And before then, I could tell you exactly every detail, where I was, what I was wearing, like
Yeah.
every little detail. And I remember sitting in shock for 10 minutes afterwards, trying to rack my brain about what happened, like what were the things that happened, all these little details. I shouldn't have, but I tried. And I tried for the next few days as well. And I
Mm.
couldn't remember anything.
Yeah. You can't go back to that visual memory, nor
Yeah.
the even the emotional, like what it does to you, like the
Yeah.
emotional engagement with that.
Yeah, it was completely gone.
Wow.
And it was like, I remembered calling my father afterwards, and he looked at me and he was like, you're free, you're
Mm.
free,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
because there was this pain that I was carrying, and I was
Yeah.
carrying for so long, and it
Yeah.
was so hard.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was in Groningen as well, there was never, like, I don't think I ever understood the impact that it had on me. But looking back, I see how it impacted all the decisions I made in my personal life, in my
Yeah.
relationships, things I was afraid of, you know, and to in one moment, God set me free. and
Right.
he set me free.
Yeah.
And that pain, I can say with complete confidence, it's been so many months now,
Yeah.
it's gone.
Yeah.
It's completely gone.
That
And
is such a
I could
miracle.
not be more grateful.
So is this whole thing now a closed chapter for you, or are you still getting therapy? Are you still working through things? How's this? Yeah, how's this part of your daily life now?
So I actually waited a while afterwards to go to the doctor
Okay.
to get myself checked out because I
Yeah.
was like, I'm not going to make like a quick decision on my
Hmm.
own.
Yeah.
And so I went out, I got checked out by the doctor. He said that I'm perfectly okay. I'm good to go. I
Yeah.
was able to stop medication. So that is completely done with. And I saw my counselor as well, and she also sort of gave me like a clean bill of health, quote unquote, in some ways, because
Right.
she could see
Yeah.
that there was a transformation, like
Right.
it wasn't, oh, you're getting better, but it was a transformation.
Right.
And I don't really mean to have this story sort of minimize anybody else's
No.
experience with trauma or things like that. But what I really want to say is that I genuinely thought it was impossible,
Mm.
to have carried that and like to live with that for so long. And then in one moment, God gave me this kind of healing. Like it was more than I could have ever imagined. All I wanted was to be free from the depression. But I
Yeah.
think the depression, the trauma, everything was intertwined. And God decided, no, we're getting her free from everything.
Yeah.
And how it is in my normal life is actually by the grace of God. God puts across more women in my path who have been through very similar things, who are going through depression now, who are struggling so much in their faith,
Mm.
and God is really, really by his grace allowed this story to be an encouragement, a help
Yeah.
for me to be there for them in ways I could have never before.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah.
So it's very much, I would say, emotionally done. I think I don't ever change the facts of what happened to me. And I
No.
think and I actually used to be so afraid. And for anyone listening to this, it took me about a few weeks actually between actually telling this story to Koen and then actually agreeing to say it to other people,
Mm.
because it took months for me to get over the shame of going through this, to get over all of this. But I'm realizing that the lower it was that I've come from just means the greater the glory God has in this
Yeah.
story as well. Because it is him, it's all him, and I cannot claim a single thing about this.
This reminds me, but I think you did 3 sermons in Vineyard in the last half year that you were with us, something like that.
Mhm.
And I remember 2 of them. One was about shame, and one was about hope.
Yep.
So I don't know. Maybe that meant something. Maybe that was someone looking forward to the testimony was still to come. A release from shame, which what you talked about then is that your Asian cultural background,
Mhm.
that is a very big deal. Shame. What will people say? I remember that from your message then. And the last message you gave was about hope, and this is definitely also something that's uh, well, perhaps the bottom line of this story. Like
Mhm.
there's still a hope. God still, even when he feels absent, he's still at work. He's still busy. Like he brings people in your path. He intervenes at
Mhm.
the right moment. He's very much part of the story. The prayer has a significant role. Ministry prayer, people praying for you in a
Mhm.
moment, but also intercession prayer on distance.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's quite interesting that you point out those two things, because I remember what I was thinking when I was preparing those 2 sermons. Hope was the very last sermon I did. I think it
Yeah,
was 2, 3 weeks before I left.
yeah,
Or it was 2 weeks before I left, and then the
mhm,
one afterwards, Jonas continued on
yeah,
Hope as well. So
yeah,
Jonas is another man that used to go to Vineyard. And when I was preparing the shame, it was actually shortly after, it was, I think, a few months after the summer where I had realized that I had this traumatic experience.
right.
So
Okay.
shame was actually very on point for me.
Yeah,
And then hope was actually the very end, because I was realizing I'm giving up a lot of stuff now. And I was
yeah,
already struggling at
yeah,
that point a little bit, because I was like, oh, I'm kind of losing my community, because I was already at almost on the fringes of the Vineyard community, because I was like, oh, I'm about to leave. I
yeah,
kind of need
yeah,
to pack up
yeah,
my relationships and stuff in
yeah,
some ways. And so hope for me was almost like an encouragement. Hey, there is hope in
yeah,
God. And then the next 2 years were somehow exactly that. It was
mm,
God being like, no, but I am removing in my power the power of shame over your life and
Yeah.
giving you my hope. So that was really cool.
So just to reflect, like when I heard this story when you were telling me in the summer. So this is kind of in the middle of when things were
Mhm,
still unfolding. Um, I remember thinking, wow, I would never have thought that someone like you would be going through something like this. Um, and it was a realization for me. Okay, right, there is always much more going on. What I get to see of people in their short time with us, and is still the tip of the iceberg.
mhm,
And that's always the case. I mean, however open people are about their lives and their feelings and whatever,
yeah.
there's always this whole iceberg underneath. And I think especially we're just with a lot of young people, a lot of people, students, young professionals, a lot of people in still in their 20s, in their um, when a lot of things like this are surfacing.
Mhm,
um, so it helped me to perhaps yeah, just have this realization again, like people are going through things that I don't know about, that I may never know about. That's okay. um, but when we deal with people, we deal with their stories, we deal with we're dealing with souls, with um, um, an unfolding story of God, where God always wants to touch the deeper levels in us, and give healing and restoration. And there's a lot more um, damage done than we may know, than we may realize. Because
mhm,
um, like meeting you and having conversation with you and just connecting with you, I knew as someone like, you're fine, like you're great, you're fantastic, you're this, you're that, you're like open, you've got it all together. This impression, while actually deep down or even hidden, even for you, for
mhm.
yourself, there's already a lot happening.
Yeah.
Um, with that in mind, what would now be your recommendation to students in our community, or others in our community that are going through stuff? What would your recommendation be?
I mean, I can give you the generic advice of like, oh, you should talk to somebody, which is great advice.
Yeah.
Pray about it, also great
Mm.
advice. But specifically, I would love to speak to the people who are going through something so difficult where there really isn't any hope, and especially people who've maybe come from a very Christian background and stuff like that, who have, who have people who think that, oh yeah, they've got it together or whatever, because I didn't know that I was kind of going to go through these things, and I genuinely believed that I was exactly that. I had my life together, I was happy,
Yeah.
there was those things. But I think God really intended that there was going to be a clean out a little bit for me in my life, and these last 2 years with COVID have been exactly that. I think God has really like dealt with some deeper issues, and I think everybody goes through a season like that in their life.
Yeah.
But my recommendation for people like that is first and foremost just to know you're not alone. Like that's what really made me decide, hey, I want to tell this story. I really want to tell the story because I don't, like, initially I was, again, the shame was coming back and I was so
Mm-hmm.
scared. I was like, all these people, they're gonna know that I'm such a wreck. But that doesn't matter. Like, I went through this. Anybody can go through this.
Yes.
And the
Yes.
reason I really share this is because I want you to know that there is healing.
Yeah.
There is healing, and there can be complete restoration,
Yeah.
not just partial restoration, not just, oh, here's a band-aid that makes you
Yeah.
that enables you to go through life. I'm not saying everybody needs to have, the kind of miracle that I have, but just that it can happen, and God is
Yeah.
loving and willing enough to have it happen.
Yeah.
A healing will come in this life or the next.
Yeah,
And
and that healing, even like when it comes in this life, sometimes is slow
yeah.
and progressive,
Mhm.
or ups and downs. Sometimes it's a moment, and what I like about your story is that it's a combination of both. Like it's not like, my I had the sickness and I was healed and I'm fine. It's there's a bigger story. There's internal things that you needed to work through, and live through and experience a deep healing, uh, to kind of come out on the other end.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And I remember, and the other thing I would absolutely say is I know it feels like God is not there. I know it feels like Jesus doesn't love you, maybe, or whatever.
Yeah.
And I remember one time I think someone was praying for me. And I was being a very big, like, skeptic, kind of like, haha, you and your prayers, at that moment, because I was like, I prayed and it didn't work. So what are you going to do? But I remember in that moment, I was back. I was 8 years old. I had a flashback. But this time, there was a third person that was there.
Oh
And
wow.
this third person was the person that unlocked the door and let me escape, whatever was happening to me. And I was like, whoa, that's how it happened. And I was like, so that for me was kind of
Yeah.
like, okay, Jesus is really there. But I've seen consistently in all of this that even when I didn't feel it, even in the moments where I wanted to attempt suicide, he was still there. He was the one that made my friend call me. He was the one that made me realize that
Yeah.
I can't find the knives.
Yeah.
It's him, and it will always be him, and he remains. And I know it feels like prayer doesn't work, that all of these things don't work, but I just really encourage people to find, especially someone that has maybe been through this. And that's something that I want to say to everybody. Koen has my contact details as well. And so if anybody ever who's going through something similar and ever wants to talk about it, whatever, I might be a few countries away,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I am more than happy to talk about it. And one very, like, important thing that I want to say before I end is that there is a spiritual battle. And that's something that I was too scared to realize. And I know a lot of us are maybe not very familiar with it, especially in Europe, where maybe not that, like, you may not have a lot of understanding about this and things like that. But it is real. And in my story, I've seen it. I've seen that it's so real. And there's a reason my dad was woken up, and because, something was very angry.
Yeah.
And I really encourage you to not let that, put that aside.
Not
But just,
underestimated.
yeah, but actually sometimes it might be a battle to be fought, a battle to be fought and won. And we have the victory in Christ.
Yes,
And
that's
that
it.
is a promise. We're not fighting from a place where it's, where we have to strive for the victory, but it's
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
And we just need to enter into that.
Yeah.
And and it is God's will that we are free. It says in Galatians 5, for freedom, Christ has set us free.
Mm.
Stand firm, therefore, and do not submit again to a yoke of slavery. Christ has set us free. And when he sets us free, it is for freedom. And I know that I have had a lot of friends as well who've been so scared that after this happens, me included, God sets you free maybe, and you're like, but how long until it happens again?
Mm.
But I
Mhm.
really encourage you to trust in that the freedom is there and it's for you to have, and it is a freedom to stay.
Yeah.
um yeah,
Yeah.
and find somebody to pray for you. I know you may not want it. I know it's hard. I know, like me, you're thinking, what's your prayer gonna do that mine hasn't?
Yeah.
But find someone to pray for you. Like, sometimes that might be the difference between a life of pain and prolonged misery and the freedom that you can experience.
Wow.
And I just want everyone to know that it was never a choice that I made in this whole story of mine. It was never something I decided to do, but it was God in everything.
Oh, yeah.
And now what's so difficult, know that God is still holding you in that too. And yeah, he's still there, and he loves you so much. And not just him, your entire church family. They love you so, so, so much. And there are so many people in this world who would absolutely hate to see you leave it so soon.
Mm. Joanna, thank you so much for sharing this. Like I'm really thankful, and I really pray that it will be an encouragement to so many people in our church community or even outside who are watching this video. Thank you for your openness in sharing so many details that are very personal, that are very even quite recent, but that you trust us with this information. And to God be all the glory. He is. he was in charge of this story. He was there even when he felt so absent. And yeah, you sharing this is for the glory of God and for the encouragement of others to continue
Mhm.
to seek Him. And what I'm taking from this as well, like when you and talk about prayer, dare to ask for prayer. I'm thinking also dare to step up and pray for people and pray boldly and pray
Yes.
with expectation that the kingdom may come here and now. Um, that should be our expectation. Our prayers mean something. God is
Yeah.
The Holy Spirit is partnering with us to
Yeah.
do stuff like this, and it's not even some special person that needs to do it. It can be anyone,
Yeah.
and it can be all of us. So
Yeah.
with that, let me stop the recording. Joanna, thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you again at Vineyard,
Yeah.
and look forward to the unfolding of the rest of your story and what God is still going to do in your life and how He's going to use you. So thank you so much,
Amen.
and God bless.
Yes, and one last thing. Oh, I don't know if you
Yep.
stopped recording. Oh.
Go ahead. No.
And one last thing to everyone who is going through something right now, to everybody who is dealing with whatever it is, depression, family issues, lose the loss of a loved one. I am also very excited to see in you the testimony that God is going to bring about. And I know I might not be there, but I am already thanking God for the miracles that are coming in your life and for the growth in your faith and how you continue to look more and more like Jesus as you walk with him every day. And that is just all I could ask for. And I'm praying for all of you as well. So bye bye. Be blessed, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. All right.